And good afternoon, and thank you for joining the Affinity webinar series on the new normal. It is a three-part series. Last month, we spoke about ways of communication. So everything from voicemail to video conferencing to phone systems, as well as to instant messaging. Today, we're going to talk about security and how to keep yourself and your employees secure while working from home, which is obviously the new normal that we are in the process of. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. For one, the webinar is currently being recorded, so I do ask you to please mute your microphones. If you have any questions throughout the event, please utilize the chat feature, which is the little chat window that you can see at the top right of your screen, and put any questions you have in there, and I will try to get to those questions as I can. Today, we're going to talk, just a quick agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about Affinity and Veracity and who we are and what we do. And then we'll talk about why now. What are the issues that have occurred as it results with security? What are those vulnerabilities? What types that are existing? And then more importantly, what are those cybersecurity best practices that you guys can do in order to do that? Finally, we'll do a quick wrap up and then answer any questions that we haven't answered throughout the show. And then we'll be done with that. So who are Affinity and Veracity? Now, for those of you not familiar with us, Affinity, we've been around since 2002. We have worked with well over 200 clients, mostly in the DC area, but a few throughout the United States. Our main services include managed services, where we essentially become the IT department for other organizations, including our 24/7 help desk, as monitoring, on-site and on-call support, cloud solutions. We offer phone solutions, as we talked about in last month's webinar. We have a division called Veracity, which handles anything and everything cybersecurity. So that would be anything from cybersecurity awareness to issues that may come up and how we handle them through incident response. We also offer mobile app development and website and software development. So the new normal. In a minute, we're going to talk about why now. Why are we vulnerable all of a sudden that we weren't vulnerable before COVID? What has changed? We'll talk about the types of vulnerabilities that exist and how they are in fact going to impact organizations or already have impacted organizations. And then we'll talk about some of the best practices you can do. Some of those best practices will in fact be items that may require a third party or an IT department. Some of them, you should be doing anyways, but we'll get into that and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. So why now? Well, all of us have had to adapt in one way or another to this new normal. For most of us, it meant working from home or another location. Some lucky people have gone off into the states of Colorado with their kids because everything was working from home. But either way, we are no longer working in the way we once did previously. As a result, businesses literally had to flip a switch almost overnight where they said, hey, you know what, we're going to let you do this, we're not going to let you do that, etc. The problem was that in granting that access and granting that remote capability, a lot of the things that we go through didn't take place. Did we secure access? Now that we're allowing people to come in from another location, how are we making sure that stayed encrypted, stayed protected? So all of a sudden, we now have new ways of getting access to our data that we didn't have before. And in the rush to do so, made those changes and really haven't had time to go back and look at that. So what do we need to do? That is what we're going to focus on today. So for one, who drives remote work policy? Well, in a standard day, the chief information officer, the CEO, the president, the head of IT, depending on how big your organization is. Up until now, we plan for that. We put together these policies, these procedures. The problem is that COVID is now dictating that. They're telling us what we can and can't do and are forcing us to make decisions we weren't prepared to make. When you add that to the fact that this unexpected dependency on technology, where before, yes, we utilized email, we utilized computers in the office, but the primary way to communicate, effective human interaction has changed. So now we have to utilize tools that may not have been properly tested or developed. And as a result, people are not used to them. They're not used to how to protect themselves or how to handle those things. So what ends up happening is those people who are used to them, otherwise known as hackers, they are able to utilize things. So they're being very creative. Typically, most hacks occur as a result of a social engineering ploy. It's essentially where people try to gain information, money, or access by tricking legitimate users into giving that to them. I probably get 7 or 8 of these a day. Yesterday was a email from Amazon, or at least portraying to be from Amazon, saying, hey, I placed this order and I shipped it. Well, if you looked at it, it wasn't real, but it was shipped to a wrong address, and it wanted me to call a 800 fraud number. The problem is that as these come in, and as we get more and more email, as we're stuck trying to manage our kids in the next room, our spouse sharing an office, whatever the case may be, we tend to be quick about going through things. Oh yeah, let me click on that. And before you realize it, it's too late. Even worse, scammers are now posing as corporate help desk users. They're finding out who you are, who you work for. They're calling you up and saying, hey, I'm from so-and-so. I need this information. Oh, no problem. You know what, we're just going to reset your password. What would you like your password to be? Okay, what was it? And then you give it to them. They're using websites. The ability for you to go onto, whether it be Facebook or otherwise, as just as a ploy to get you to the next level. So once you get into Facebook and you put in this wrong password, they have access. They now know who you are, who you're related to. They've just gathered all this information to use in another ploy to get access. So what ends up happening is your fear and everything else that's going on, what ends up happening is you are not going to places you should or shouldn't be going to. So that results in what we'll call a less protected workspace. So this broad shift of work from home arrangements has amplified many cybersecurity challenges, whether it's people who aren't using VPN software to connect to their office, whether it's weak enforcement, of what we'll call risk mitigating behaviors or the human firewall. You're in the office, you have a different mindset than when you're working from home. It could be just psychological stress. If you're like me, you got kids who are learning virtually. Thankfully, they're going to start going back to school sometime. But the problem is that I'm going between answering a question from a colleague to answering a question about how to do long division. And so my mindset may not be there. And if you run into these issues and you're not thinking about it and you're stressed out, what ends up happening is, in fact, that you are making choices that make it easier for people to get into. When you add all these things together, you literally have a recipe for disaster. You have this unprecedented global crisis. You have a lot of information. You have a lot of misinformation. And we're not even talking politics here. We're talking strictly in general. We have stressed employees, whether it's because of their family not getting out of the house, whatever the case may be. You have an insecure and uncontrolled work environment. You have software that may not be working the way you expected because you never expected to be working with that software. And then, of course, you have people who are working in IT who just are unprepared and overstretched, not due to any fault, but just for the fact that it just came about so quickly and they've just been fighting to get back just to a status quo. So the question is, how are we being exploited? But if you look at it, this is where we're running into problems today. You have malware. Back in the day, we just called those viruses. You had antivirus software, took care of the issue. You were pretty good. Yes, maybe occasionally one went through, but you just ran the virus software or a separate one, you got cleaned up. While we're still getting some of that, the bigger issue now is things like ransomware, where literal businesses are getting all of their data encrypted, and then they're being told to pay a ransom in order to get it back. In some cases, they just pay it because it's easier. The problem is, you don't when you pay that money, you don't know if you're actually going to get it unencrypted. 2, a lot of people are like, well, I'll pay the money, I'll be done, it would be great, but they never actually look to see how they got the ransomware to begin with. So they just end up that way again in a month or 2. Others, which are restoring from backups the way we'd recommend in general, same problem. They're restoring from backup, but that back door still exists. Then you have compromised and stolen credentials. And it can be from a variety of ways. I'll give you an example of one that occurred many years ago, where what ended up happening was this IT company was trying to convince a bank to hire them in order to provide protection for security. The problem is that the bank believed that They were protected. They had the highest security, firewalls, everything was great. What they didn't realize was the fact that their weakest line of defense was in fact their employees. So what the IT company did was they went to a local electronics store, whether it be Best Buy, or that's pretty much the only one left in nowadays, especially with Fry's just going out of business. But they went and they bought these USB drives. They carefully opened the packages, you know, those packages that nobody can actually open, and they took the USB drives out, they put a virus and a key logging software. What key logging software does is it literally just copies everything you type and sends it off to an email or to some other remote location with that information. They then put the USB drives back. They resealed the packages so it looked like they were brand new. They went to the bank parking lot on a Monday morning just before people were due to arrive, and they carefully placed them on the islands between parking spots. As you can only imagine, what happened was the employees got there and said, oh, wow, look at this. Somebody dropped some free USB drives. Well, this is great. I'll just take them. And of course, they went right into the bank and they plugged them in. Now, nothing happened. They had no idea that there was anything wrong. As far as they were concerned, the drives were perfectly just brand new drives. What happened was that software started capturing every keystroke. So when they logged into the bank, when they logged into their accounts, all of that data was sent off to this remote location, which was controlled by the IT company. Well, as you can only imagine, they now had access to it. Now that took a lot of, creativity and ingenuity, and nowadays most people lock down their USB drives, although I'm going to bet that some people on this call don't. But that is another way. So how do you protect against that? Phishing we've talked about. Essentially, phishing is sending out emails that make it seem like it's real, but they're not, and you provide that data. Brute force attacks. Not much you can do about that outside of making your passwords long and complex. A brute force attack is they take a dictionary of passwords, they run it up against a system, and eventually one of those passwords will eventually come through, especially if it's something simple, your cat's name, your dog's name, or any common word. 8.5% hacking. That is literal hacking, people going in and trying to connect and use it and so forth. I'm amazed it's actually that high, but again, things you can do: update your firmware, make sure that these vulnerabilities don't exist. And then other, these could be worms, Trojan horses, things that were installed years ago that just all of a sudden got reactivated. So as you can imagine, not every item or solution there, or not every item there has the same solution. You need a multiple set of solutions for it. So what are the biggest issues we're seeing today as it relates to COVID? Well, for one, phishing attacks. Today, they're considered the top cause of data breaches. And the reason is that they're people-based. In other words, individuals, those stressed people we've talked about already, they are getting emails and they're filling out information. They're not doing it on purpose. They looks real. They don't think about it. They're getting it. In fact, they're getting it because of this modern change. In fact, Checkpoint, which is a large IT security vendor, they reported that 1,700 Zoom-related domains were registered over a 3-week period. They just took a 3-week period. 4% of them were suspicious. Now, that was back in June of last year. That has continued. These are all fake Zoom accounts, people that are just creating these Zoom domains for people to register for events, or what they think are registering for events. And in fact, you're just providing information. The biggest problem is that most people use the same password. So when they put in their email and their password, they've just given them something to check against bank accounts, etc. Lately, biggest problem we're seeing with phishing is health organization phishing. Everyone's waiting for a vaccine for those who want one. Well, as you all know, vaccines are almost impossible to come by. So now we're getting emails from CVS, from Kroger, from Walmart, Safeway. Here in Fairfax County, Giant is now going to be providing it through the health department. But as you can imagine, it just provides a whole new vector of, oh, we're now going to send emails from Giant saying, hey, sign up for a new vaccination, provide your information. Of course, they're going to ask for your date of birth. They may even ask for your social security number because people don't realize that you don't need to provide that to get the vaccines. So people are going to start doing this, especially the most vulnerable. So what ends up happening is, as you gather this data, phony websites, information about your community, or even worse, contribute to a charity that's going to help COVID victims or people who've lost their job as a result of COVID. And now you're giving away money. These are all ways that phishing is applying and what they're doing to people right now. As you work from home, you have nobody to protect you from that. You don't have the firewalls, etc. So what can you do to protect yourself? We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Home Wi-Fi security. Most home Wi-Fi systems are those set up by your cable provider, your phone provider, whoever it is you're getting your internet from. The reason that's a problem is they're all using generic default passwords. Well, if people can hack into your home, they now have access to your machines, they have access to your office because they're going through there. Luckily, more and more routers are using the WPA2, for example, which is a higher level encryption protocol. But again, if you're using default passwords, it doesn't matter. Password sharing. By far, the biggest challenge when it comes to managing employees is passwords. If you look at the statistics that are up here, 23% of respondents to a survey indicated that they've shared their work passwords with a third party. Partners, roommates, friends, it doesn't matter who they are, but these are your work passwords. They're sharing those. In other countries, as high as 25% and 26% in France and Australia. Another pitfall is that most people aren't changing their passwords. In the same survey, 20% said they changed their computer password over the past month. That means 80% have not. 14% haven't changed their password in more than 6 months. 18% said that their computer isn't even password protected in the first place. Now, when people go home, they utilize these computers, whether they're work computers or home computers that are using to connect to work. If they're not using a password there, they've just opened it up to your office. If they can get access to a computer, that your computer has access to that office, they have that. Most people click save the password, and guess what? Now they have access to it. Very easy to do. Loss of equipment control. Well, when most people bring their systems home, what ends up happening? Well, for one, if they weren't prepared for it, laptops and remote devices may not be encrypted. What this means is if you give me a Windows computer, doesn't matter the version of Windows, it's not encrypted, I could easily, and I mean easily, within 5 minutes, access that computer. All I need to do is run a copy of Linux on the machine, very simple to do. It boots up in about 2.5 minutes. I run a little password device cracker. It pulls up and it doesn't actually even have to know the password. It literally just lets me overwrite it. If it's encrypted, I can't do that. Most people do not encrypt their home computers. And in fact, unless you have Windows Professional on the computer, encryption is not included. The good news is it is included for those with Windows Professional. So most company machines are, but they may never actually turn it on. So another thing that can be done. These are all issues that come up as a result from working from home because again, most people, yeah, maybe they brought their laptop home, but it was always brought into the office. There was always ways to update it. Now, there is no office or people aren't going into the office and IT can't do certain things remotely. So we've talked about some of the issues that come up. Now we'll talk about what are some of those best practices. So for one, secure your home office. Now, most people think, all right, well, we're talking about network security. No, I'm actually talking about regular security. We have received numerous phone calls from clients who have had laptops stolen from their home, who have had iPads stolen from their home, mobile devices stolen from their home, or at least they're telling us from their home, but they're getting stolen. So how do you secure them? Well, lock the door to your home office. And it's not even a securing them from being stolen. Sometimes it's a matter of a child, well, I wanted to get on YouTube. I wanted to go watch a TikTok video, whatever the case may be. And something got overwritten, something was accessed, it doesn't really matter. Once the child gets access to it and they do something or they leave it open or they don't secure it, it's providing another way in for hackers. As we just talked about, encryption, passwords. Even if it's something simple as utilizing a PIN or biometrics, drawing a pattern, something beyond just leaving it open. But again, if it's not encrypted, those are easily defeated. Now, to defeat them, we need to be able to access them. Being able to utilize Find My Device and Remote Wipe. Most devices nowadays give you that ability. So if a device is lost or stolen, the ability to go in there and remove confidential information so that the hacker can't access it or can't access the office is very important. Most hackers, most people are going to boot up the machine and get it online. Once it's online, you have that ability if you're utilizing the right software. Now, there are a lot of people, and one of the questions that just came up was, what about desktop computers? Yes, it's a little bit different. People still have to steal the desktop. It's harder to steal. They're not being brought around. Nobody's carrying a desktop under their arm when they go into Starbucks for a variety of reasons. One, there's no battery. But the other issue is, if you haven't seen a desktop recently, they are tiny. In fact, some of them weigh just as much or just as little as a laptop. So they're becoming much easier to steal. So yes, you should also do that with the desktops. Again, if you have Windows Pro versus Windows Home, it's built in. There's nothing more you need to do outside of turning on BitLocker. Securing your home network. For one, default passwords. We talked about that when you talk about the Wi-Fi, but that's the same with routers as well. There are many times where I could drive around my neighborhood, I'll tell you the neighborhood I live in, and I see open Wi-Fi. I see the ability to just get on there. I could literally connect to their network, shut it all off, and they wouldn't even know what happened. So what should you do? Well, one, home router, you should change the default password. Even if you just change it, most passwords are admin as the username, password as the default password. Some companies have gotten a little more clever, but not really. That's the first thing you should do. Second is firmware updates. For those of you who weren't paying attention last summer, the FBI came out and said, we need everybody to reboot their home routers. The problem is one of the largest home router companies in the world had a default password. A hacker in Russia had figured this out and was utilizing everybody's home router to launch an attack. Now, the FBI wanted to reboot it because that would at least take them offline, the time it took to get everything coordinated. It didn't actually resolve the problem. But this is what's happening. A lot of this, especially in today's day in Internet of Things, where everything is Internet enabled, things are going to easily be hacked. And I mean everything. There's already talk about people's pacemakers, which now are all wireless so that people don't have to go and plug themselves in, being hacked. Can you only imagine the consequence of a pacemaker? Well, that's a whole other discussion for another day, but these are things you need to be concerned about. USB devices. You should have your employees' machines and your machines locked down so that you can't transfer data on a USB. You can utilize it. You don't have to lock down the USB, so you can't use a wireless mouse or any other device like that, but you can definitely lock it down so data cannot be transferred. Not only is it going to save your intellectual property, but it can also save a virus being implemented onto that machine. If you don't have antivirus or anti-malware, you need it. Yes, Microsoft provides a base one, which is better than nothing, but it's not the greatest. And the reason is you want something that is a advanced learning-based antivirus, one that can utilize the cloud to pull definitions or other issues going on from other parts of the world, while also having the intelligence to look for actions versus previously known viruses. Another item you can do is invest in dark web monitoring. Now, as I mentioned, anyone who's on the call, we will give a free scan where we'll search the dark web for your personal information and let you know if anything's out there. But as more and more data gets stolen, as more and more things happen that gets out there. In fact, I was watching a report last evening on the national news about how people's social security reports, their credit reports, were being completely inaccurate as a result of COVID. Some people because of mortgage payments and everything else. Well, a lot of that data is based on stuff that can be stolen. Your identity is stolen and sold on the dark web. By having dark web monitoring, you can actually keep an eye on that. So something else that you should look at for yourselves and for your organization. Separating work from home is probably the most important thing you can do with your home employees. And what I mean by that is work devices should be used just for work. Your kids should not be playing Fortnite on your home computers. You should be using a VPN or some other technology, whether that be terminal emulation software like a LogMeIn or a Screen Connect. But you should be utilizing something so that the data remains within the network of your organization. By doing that, data is not getting shared, information is not going over there across a public network, whether that's in a public Wi-Fi location or even at home where other people may have access to it. Again, the weakest link is where that is. It's your kid's computer that gives access to the network. Now they have access to the office. By using the VPN, you have authentication. Password protection, by far the biggest and simplest thing you can do. Change your passwords somewhat regularly. Use complex passwords, and I mean 15 to 16-digit passwords that use things that don't make any sense to anybody. Use a password manager, LastPass, Dashlane. There are so many of them out there. And then use multi-factor authentication, which essentially means that in addition to the password, you must have some randomly generated component that's usually on your cell phone or a text message, or even an email if you want to go simple 2FA, that allows you not only to prove that you are who you are by knowing the password, but that you are who you are by having that token of identification. Phishing protection. One, invest in cybersecurity awareness training. All of Affinity clients have this training program where they literally watch a video, it takes tests, and then every week we send out fake phishing emails to see if they click on them. Real simple, it reminds people to check things, it reminds people to take an idea of what's happening. Better to be caught by our training awareness than by a real phishing email. Invest in email filtering technology. Sure, you know, Office 365 has a junk mail folder. Same thing with Google, but it only catches so much. And the problem is once you get that one email on your computer, whether it be a phishing email, whether it be a virus, it's already too late. By investing in a technology like that, where it checks the email before it comes in, you're much better protected. Touching upon the training, where we talked about investing in the cybersecurity awareness training, just teaching your staff how to, one, recognize phishing and what we call spear phishing, more directed, and whaling attacks, which is less directed. Avoid malicious email attachments, things that they can look for. The urgency. It's getting that email from the CEO that seems weird because they're asking for gift cards and they need them right now, today. Those are things that should trigger a red flag, but unfortunately do not. Use operation security on social media accounts. Make sure that they're not putting too much information out there. And again, I've had this discussion in many classes that I've done. Those people love to put information out on LinkedIn, of course, TikTok or everything else. You want to put all your information out there. The more information you put out there, the more they collect on you. If you put out there that you graduated in the year 2000 from NYU, well, guess what? In the year 2020, you're going to get the 20-year college reunion, 25, etc. All this data is being captured. Once it's there, there's another way to get you to believe that you've received a legitimate email. Only allow administrators to install software. By far the biggest complaint we get from our clients, well, I just want to be able to install whatever I need. Well, the problem with that is twofold. One, you're letting people do things with their computer that they probably shouldn't. But two is if they have access to install, the virus has access to install. So by limiting administrative access to install any software, you are literally making it almost impossible for a virus to get installed. Or if it does, only on their account of the computer instead of the whole computer. And browser plugins, very popular today, whether it be the coupon ones like from Honey or other ones. The problem is that they're coming from unknown and unidentified developers. You have no idea what's going on. In fact, there was a app that had been downloaded over 10 million times on an Android phone. That was as simple as reading a barcode. That's all it did. And for 4 or 5 years, I think it's been 4 or 5 years, never had a problem with it. Then all of a sudden, it started bombarding people's phones with ads. Think of it like a Trojan horse. It's just been sitting there, gathering all these people, and now it's payback time. It's like, we're going to throw all these ads out there because even if people click on one of them, they're now making a ton of money. So be very careful about what you install and how it gets installed. Public places are by far the biggest challenge. Whether it's I'm going to go work from Panera, I'm going to go work from wherever the case may be. So if you are going to sit in public, and we don't recommend connecting to public Wi-Fi, but if you are, don't access anything sensitive. If you want to do social media, etc., you want to quickly check your email, all right, as long as it's over SSL or secured sockets. Other things you can do, sit so your screen is obscured, so people aren't reading over your shoulder. So your back typically facing a wall. Before you leave, make sure you log out of everything. Do not check anything that says remember my password, remember my device, my location, especially if it's mobile. If you're at home on a computer, desktop, it's a little more easy to do that. On a laptop, once it's stored in there, if they have access to your main account, they have access to everything else. Manually delete any documents you've downloaded if using a public machine. Use private browsing so it doesn't store any data in the browser. And again, that's more for public machines versus you taking your laptop somewhere, but still something you should do. And if you can, restart any devices that you use that somebody else might use. So, as I mentioned, we have information of who's on the call. We'll reach out to get that, but we'll provide that information. But right now, before I jump back to this, I'll quickly jump here and take a look for any questions. So if you have any other questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. So one of the question being asked is that I have a mix of remote and in-office workers. I want to make sure remote workers aren't connecting company devices to unsecured Wi-Fi or downloading potential malware. How can I get that done? Well, a lot of it depends on what level of constraint you want to put on there. As a network-based or domain-based computer, you can set policies, typically group policies, which do not let them to connect to any unknown network. The problem with that is if they're remote and they're working from a home, do you know what all those home networks are? Do you know what that is? And here's the problem. You can't say to them, yeah, why don't you do this? Call the IT department and we'll just get you connected. Because obviously, in order to get connected, the IT department needs to be able to connect to their computer. But you can put policies in there that eliminate some level of that. It really depends on exactly how you want to do that. Now, potential malware, that's easy. You can utilize tools like DNS filtering. So it doesn't allow certain downloads from certain components, certain websites. You can use antivirus software. You can use other types of things that make sure you can't get installed. Don't let them log in as administrator. These are all things you can do. And it really depends on your individual environment. And I'm happy to talk offline with anybody about some of those recommendations, whether we work with you on your IT or not. Second question that we have here, with the vaccine coming out, I'm worried about investing too much money on enabling remote work. Will taking these steps be wasted once we get back to the office, or will the benefits carry over? Great question. Most of the items I've talked about have been items of training. So we've talked about things you should do when you're in public, so that's always going to be remote work. We've talked about handling things such as antivirus. We've talked about handling things such as making sure you're not connecting to networks you shouldn't be, and having those tools in place. So you're always going to need that training to teach people how to look at things. You're always going to need that antivirus software. You're always going to need to make sure that when you are traveling, you're utilizing VPNs and other remote connections. So everything we've talked about today are things that are going to be beneficial as they get back to the office. But in my honest opinion, we're never going to go back to the way we were. Everyone getting up, going to the office. Some people go to the office a couple times a day. Some people won't. Some people work from this. As people have realized that they can be more productive being at home on some days, or whether it be for kids and so forth. I had this discussion with my kids about whether there'll ever be another snow day. And to my surprise, of course, there was one. So that discussion was kind of moot at this point. But with the ability now of, well, it's a snow day, we're going to close the office. No, we're going to work from home. Oh, your kid's not feeling well. You need to be at home. Do you still want to work, or do you need to take the time off? All of these things are going to change the way we work. They're going to change the way we do things. So everything we talked about today is going to be completely beneficial. So no, I don't think doing this or investing in these things, and everything I've talked about is not very expensive. We're talking about utilizing encryption. Again, if you just use the Windows Professional version, which is about $100 more on a new laptop. So if you break that out over the life of a laptop, so 48 months, it's $2 more a month you're paying for that beneficial protection. So everything we're talking about here is very inexpensive. The training, that's going to cost you less than $20 a user. Things like that are all things that you should be doing, very inexpensive to do, and are going to pay dividends whether you're working from home or working. Let me see if there are any other questions. I think I've answered a few of the others that have come in. No, I believe that is it. So I'll give it another minute to see if there's any other questions. While we're doing that, couple of things I'll bring up. So this again was the second out of 3 webinars we are doing as it relates to the new normal. In March, we're going to talk about IT outsourcing. And obviously that's what we do for a living. We're going to talk about why you're going to get some of the benefits. And in fact, IT co-working seems to be something we're doing more and more of, which is those organizations that have an IT in-house position, person, etc. And we are working with them where we're just providing those pieces they need, whether that's that frontline help desk, whether that's just providing the tools that we offer. So we're going to talk a lot about that as it come up in March. We'll be getting information out about that, and if you can sign up right now on our website so we can send you that information. So at this point, it does not look like, oh, I did want to talk one more thing. It did not look like we have any other questions coming in, but we do have a rewards program, a referral program that we've started out at the beginning of the year. And that essentially is, if you know of a company who is looking for IT and is willing to meet with us, we're going to send you a gift card. It literally doesn't matter whether they sign a contract or not. We just want to thank you for referring them to us. So that's great. And if you are a client and they sign up with us, we're going to take the value of whatever that contract is they sign with us and apply that to your account. So 2 things here. Obviously, we'll get you a gift card. I got a whole bunch sitting right here next to me, just waiting to be sent out. So please, if you have any referrals, you can just email referrals@affinity.com or just contact me directly. And at that point, I have put our information out here. Again, my name is Mike Drobnis. Easiest way is send an email. It's info@Affinity. So you don't have to butcher the spelling of my last name, but please join us for our next webinar, which will be in March. And again, as I've mentioned, we are recording this webinar and we will be sharing it up on our website and on the YouTube channel for Affinity. So thank you again for taking your time today, and look forward to seeing you in the future.